Hello and welcome to another Gameplay Monday episode where we review two junglers, and in this one we're going back to the high MMRs by looking at Nocturne vs Shaco. Now, as you know, most Gameplay Mondays are focused on the high MMRs where we can learn something from both junglers in these games, no matter who's actually winning and no matter what junglers they're playing, but we get to look at a different variety of playstyles all in one nice package. Now, as a lot of people liked the low MMR mistakes video we did last week for Gameplay Monday, I will continually add those in as well, but it is important to also look at high MMR where we can see how to do things in a good way rather than just looking at simple mistakes. And before we go into the gameplay, the League Partner Program has once again given us some free skin giveaways along with a green chroma, this time for Winter Wonder Nico. 2 codes will randomly show up during the course of this video, and I will also be going through the comments in a couple of days to pick some EU West or EU Northeast winners from those comments. And now, in a saucy twist, both Nocturne and Shaco start on their red buffs. Shaco has pre-planted his little boxes in front of the Krugs as well as the red, even if he sadly placed his box slightly too early for that red buff. Nonetheless, he gets a bit of a leash and he's able to move down to the Krugs. Nocturne, on the other hand, he goes straight to his Raptors. Because of his sweeping auto attacks in his Q, he's able to take that very quickly, and then he can move up to the topside scuttle. Now, if you watched the jungle roots video I did last week, you know that the way to shut down the red to Krugs to Raptor clear to get that level 3 is simply exert pressure on the scuttle crabs as soon as possible. So after taking the topside scuttle, because of good vision by both teams in those pixel bushes, he's able to move straight on down to the river, and Shaco has to back off. Nocturne's bot lane had the lane priority and was already moving up. Shaco could not contest it, and immediately both scuttle crabs are off the map and Nocturne has total river control. He also returns the favor and heads to bot lane for a cheeky gank. It's nothing to write home about, but it's just simply to let them know that he's in the area, here's some pressure, here's a bit of CS spacing, especially as they are against a Lucian brand bot lane. Shaco has then instead gone into his Raptors and cleared his whole top side, while Nocturne does his blue and then heads down to bot lane to clean up a kill on the Lucian after his Kai'Sa has already been killed. Now, you would normally assume he's just going to fall back to his Gromp and Wolves. However, the Nocturne doesn't do that and instead roams up to the mid lane because they've got a Kassadin, and everyone knows that Kassadin scales, or more than anyone, and so he wants to get off a kill and pressure onto that lane. Zoe does a good job of getting him low. Nocturne shows patience, waits for Kassadin's flash, and then flash E's to finish him off. 2 early kills for the Nocturne. He wasn't so much concerned with his farm. He wanted river control to prevent Shaco from counter jungling and getting off any form of pressure in this pre-level 6 phase, and he himself was well positioned with already 3 ganks on lanes, even as Nocturne. So take that as an example. When you're confused about farming or ganking, ganking's probably going to be better for your team in the long run than you just sitting in your jungle farming. That being said, if you're doing a full proper clear with good experience in camp control as well as good vision and there isn't a lot of pressure from the other jungler, it can work out. The Shaco in this case has done a full clear now and then heads to the top side where he conducts a lane gank on the enemy Aatrox. Now, because of Nocturne's early game, he's able to go back, get some nice items with his 2 kills, and all his camps are up, which means he can do a bot to top sequencing, which will allow him to tie up with his second red buff spawn. Nicely thought out, good activity, and he will get level 6 pretty soon. And because Shaco was on the top side, he's able to do his Gromp Wolves, get the first RNG scuttle spawn, and then also counter jungle the Shaco's second Raptor spawn. Nice take for him, good experience haul, while the Shaco has instead gone straight back and then into the mid lane to try and gank the Zoe. He isn't thinking too much about the Nocturne's positioning, who's right there, to counter gank. And this is where I didn't like the Shaco's pathing. I'm not sure what his game plan is exactly, but it does seem a bit more random than it necessarily needs to be, and the Nocturne is definitely forcing him to over gank or over try hard in order to get his own pressure down. You can see that by the fact that he keeps trying to come back, and then while Nocturne retreats to take his Raptor spawn and second red, Shaco has done his Wolves and then comes back into the mid lane. Eventually, they'll let the Shaco be an inspiration for us all to never give up on a gank as he returns once again and they finally grab a kill on the Zoe. However, the Nocturne, because of his more, let's say, measured and controlled early game, he's got that level 6, and a wonderful lane ward punishes the lazy back by the Kassadin. Your versus Nocturne, never go back in a place where you might be seen. Simply go back to your tower where you have no vision and he cannot ult you, because guess what? He's going to ult and kill you, which he does onto the Kassadin. 3 kills for the Nocturne early, and because of that opportunistic kill, he's in position to 1v1 the Shaco over the scuttle spawn, which we had seen Nocturne take, but Shaco didn't know that. It's a relatively equal fight, no one dies, close enough that they both escape, and the wonderful thing about the Scry's Bloom is it gives Shaco that security of knowing the Nocturne's going back to base, and that Zoe won't be rotating and he can easily secure his red before going back to heal up himself. Now at this stage, you'll notice the red pings on the Fire Drake because Nocturne's team does not have vision of the area. They're not sure where the Lucian and Brand are, and they aren't sure about the state of the Shaco. I think it's a bit unnecessary. It's kind of clear that they wouldn't have gone to do that, especially given that the Zoe has lane priority on the Kassadin at this stage, and he was way too low to be able to do that. Nonetheless, they head down in that direction, and it's important to ask yourself at this stage, who do you think is in control of this game as a jungler? The answer should be very obvious, because Nocturne's actions are forcing Shaco to rotate to fights, to situations he doesn't really want to be doing all the time. He's not farming very much at all at this stage, but he is reacting to action because he's hoping to pick up a kill or two or some kind of advantage that will let him do what he wants to do, which is sneak around, be a bitch, and kill everyone. And so taking advantage of the mid priority he has and the offset back timings they have compared to the enemy team, Nocturne's red side decides, hey, let's do the Fire Drake. However, you are versus a Lucian Brand who rotate and are able to pick up a kill on the Nocturne. The Shaco once again is going, oh, good grief, I have to rotate, I just want to farm, leave me alone, and he rotates down to the dragon. And unfortunately for him, the aggro resets just at around 700 HP, which is a bit more than his smite, so he wouldn't have been able to take it securely at that exact stage. And then because it resets, it forces him into a really messy situation, and this elongated fight just ends up with him dying at his red pit. The Kai'Sa is starting to scale, the Zoe's starting to get a bit of scaling herself, even though she did die early, she's being able to shove and outplay the Kassadin in this laning phase. And after a bit of waffling around the river, still obsessed with this dragon, Nocturne wastes his ultimate. The Lucian rotates up and punishes him for his mispositioning, forcing the Nocturne to flash over the wall. Lucian follows, however, plays it well, and grabs himself a kill. The Leona does land a nice ultimate onto the Lucian though, and they pick a return kill, however does end up with the Shaco grabbing 2 kills. So the Nocturne's huge dominating advantage in the early game, controlling the map completely, well, it's kind of over now due to these fights around the dragon in this mid lane skirmish, because they did have a lot of shutdown gold and bounties, and that gives the blue team a nice reprieve. So in this kind of game, when you're the Shaco and everyone's consistently fighting, it is better to rotate and help, because yes, you could farm and say, well guys, stop fighting, but if you don't act, if you simply be very passive and let the Nocturne do what he wants, your team's never gonna get off the ground. Yeah, maybe he just had a better, more active early game. You can still do something about it even as Shaco. He does have a unique playstyle obviously, but rotating, picking up kills, securing objectives, all of these are good things and better than a Wolfer and Grump. However, it is important to mix that up a little bit. The raw obsession with the Fire Dragon continues, and would you believe it or not, after the Shaco gets poked out and has to return to base thanks to some plays by Kai'Sa in the mid lane, the Nocturne takes his wolves and heads straight back to the pit. They know the enemy bot lane's gone, they know the Shaco has to go back, so even though Brand is contesting and Lucian ends up contesting, it's a super one fight for Nocturne's team as well as a dragon secure. In classic fashion, the Kassadin misreads the situation, TBs in, and also dies. The Shaco once again immediately rotates, he's not focused on his own farm, he goes straight over there, picks up a kill, and because of this rotating, because of his consistent response to the fighting, even if they are bad fights, even if everyone is just being a bit bloodthirsty, he does get the minion wave advantage, the health advantage, and he can push down first tower, which is a really nice chunk of gold for him and sort of completely negates any other advantages the Nocturne had. Now after this, there is a lot of quiet time. Both junglers fully clear their jungles a few times. Nocturne gets a really nice gank off on the top lane to kill the Urgot, which gives the Aatrox a nice advantage on the top side tower, which he's able to take. And overall, due to his impact and his camp clearing, which he's done more so than the Shaco, who's had to consistently react to things dictated by the Nocturne, means that Nocturne has a level up on him. Now every champion has a plus and a minus to what they can do. Shaco is a very unique playstyle, Nocturne is quite straightforward in that sense, and because he's got a decent lead over the rest of the blue team besides for the enemy jungler, as soon as someone shows out of position, he's able to actually punish that really heavily. In this case, Shaco's farming, Lucian shows too far up in the mid lane, Nocturne ults, and he's gone. This continual eradication of someone from the enemy team means that while his team is struggling to push up and take more towers, they also don't allow the enemy team any sort of way to come back into the game. So there's a bit of a stalemate here, and some crucial events need to happen in order for it to break open, as per usual, and both junglers played a little bit differently. Of course, Shaco wants to assassinate people, take them off, surprise them. He doesn't want to walk straight into CC. In this case, he kills the Leona, but the Kai'Sa's quite fed at this stage and just to kill him off. This gives Nocturne the ability to go to the bot lane and split push, and this is what he will do quite often, sometimes a little greedily, but he continues his XP snowballing advantage by pushing those waves because he has his ultimate to rotate to the mid lane if necessary. It gives him a strong 1-3-1 split push advantage with the Aatrox having TP and the Nocturne having ultimate. However, and I see this way too much by fed top laners, even in high elos, where they are split pushing with their lead and then they die from an enemy rotate collapse because they pushed up too much, and then they complain what their team's doing. Well, in this situation, yeah, they're taking the Rift Herald, but at the same time, stop split pushing as soon as you know your team isn't parallel with you. Because if you have no pressure on any other lane, then it's easy for the enemy to rotate to you and take you off the map. I covered this in a few months ago in my Kindred split push video. You need to know when to back off and then re-show, back off and re-show. Especially if your team is securing something that they can then push with afterwards. So if you stay on the map and your team can activate Herald and you've got a 1-3-1, that gives you a huge tower pushing advantage that the enemy cannot deal with because you've got TP and a global. Nevertheless, the Nocturne decides he wants to die, and at least his team's able to pick up the Rift Herald, even if once again it releases pressure on the enemy, gives them time to regain vision control and not cross those boundaries. And you see here with this fight in the mid lane, what he wants to do. Shaco wants to go and try and assassinate someone. Sadly, he's not quite far enough ahead for that to happen on the Zoe, but he is able to go in, use an assassin in and out gameplay, and then come back and clean up a Kai'Sa kill. But what he did mostly was actually force divided focus by the enemy. Kai'Sa was poked up from the front and then trying to retreat gets picked off. The Nocturne sort of split between peeling and fighting the enemy team, and Leona of course is also the same situation. This allows Lucian to be a bit more free without any harass, and they're able to almost clean up everyone in the fight but the Zoe. However, despite this, as I've told you, vision control, body language, and confidence can be enough even if you don't have a huge gold lead. The gold lead here isn't too great, and this first play will begin the snowball that the one team needs to win. In this case, Nocturne's team has complete control of the river and the pit, whereas Shaco's team and Urgot, they're kind of apprehensive about going and face checking, which they should be. They have a Leona and a Nocturne. As soon as you show out of position, you're gonna be done for. This gives them more than enough time to start the Baron and play around it. With the third Kai'Sa, that thing really melts quickly. Kassadin hasn't quite reached his obnoxious levels of destruction, and the Nocturne, despite smiting way too early, is lucky to get away with sneaking that Baron. Shaco makes a valiant attempt, and the Nocturne lives with an absolute sliver of health from the Kassadin, and that's a Baron plus a gold lead plus a power play, and the blue team simply cannot overcome that hurdle at this stage. So now, how do they close this game out when they've had such difficulty even in the mid game taking towers without the Baron? Now, even though they got the Baron, the fact that the Shaco respawns and the Nocturne takes his time moving down to that Fire Drake that just came up, as well as the Scuttle Crab on the river, gives the Shaco time to go to the Dragon Pit and start it up. It also gives the Kassadin time to rotate over. However, the Kassadin is 2 levels down on the Nocturne and he just gets destroyed, but the 2v1 is enough to take off the Nocturne, which gives the blue team a nice Fire Drake which can stall out and give them more damage. And you've also noticed that Lucian is pushing in the top side and grabs that outer tower. So a nice little gold swing for them. However, as with the low MMR video last week, everyone knows or should know at this point in League of Legends history, if the enemy is split up and you have even a lead or a numbers advantage, engage and win that fight, which is of course what Leona does with Kai'Sa and Zoe, and they're able to take an inhibitor tower before the Shaco does what he likes to do and is actually able to kill the Kai'Sa. So yes, Nocturne's team got the Baron, but by not having the same vision of how to close out the game, by just sort of doing what they feel they should be doing, they've given the enemy team a window, and yeah, they took some towers and an inhibitor tower, but who really got more out of the situation? It's sort of like an equal play. The Shaco team will definitely feel very confident about the haul they just grabbed. It's a lot of gold and a nice bunch of stats from the Fire Dragon, and the Nocturne's team will think, well, we got Baron and all we got for it was 2 towers. So now the red team is scared about pushing up too much and making too many mistakes, so they're playing much more reserved. The blue team is doing what they should do. Don't extend past vision, let the enemy team tilt into them by forcing them to make a play in order to win the game, which in solo queue can be who knows what, and can always allow you time to come back into it. In this case, Lucian's in the bottom side, Nocturne ults, he tower dives, he uses a stopwatch, and that's another kill. This forces the Shaco to be the one that has to stop the Nocturne split pushes. He has to be the one around that area because he has enough damage and high enough XP levels to at least combat him and force him to back off. If it's a Lucian or someone squishy, he's just gonna ult and kill them. Now because of this, a few moments later when the next Baron is up, the Shaco shows on the bottom side and Nocturne uses his Q with his team and sprints immediately over to the Baron spawn because the Shaco cannot afford to run the risk that the Nocturne's gonna re-push the wave and take the tower because he can push really, really fast. So because the Nocturne pushed up the wave and then immediately rotated to the Baron while his team had started it, Shaco is going to be behind him. This gives the red team enough time to secure it and win the fight. Our weird little Joker friend does what he can to try and salvage the situation, but as the pace of the game has shown, he is doing his best to rotate and pick up plays where he can, but it's just not enough at this stage. And now with Baron, with his dominating split push and lane advantage as well as global pressure, means that Leona, Zoe, Kai'Sa, and the Aatrox can hard push the top lane and win the game. So as you can see, making these early game ganks, this pressure, even if you are farming jungler, can really dictate the entire pace of the game. If the enemy jungler is being forced to rotate all the time to these skirmishes, and you're winning them overall, or at least going neutral, when it does come to the objective game, and you're getting more dragons, you're being able to make the calls on barons, you have the better vision, they're continually playing on the back foot, all because of early and mid game pressure. Then, if you're a split pushing champion, you have tower pressure that no one can afford to deal with except the enemy jungler. jungler. This gives you priority on dragons and barons if they're on the other side of the map, which in part was dictated by the Nocturne's powerful clear and lane priority that he had in that level 1, 2, 3 phase. So hopefully you're able to learn something about different playstyles in terms of assassinating, diving, split pushing. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed this Gameplay Monday video. Please consider officially joining on YouTube for access to perks, basically the same as Twitch subbing. Subscribe for more Jungle and League of Legends videos coming very soon. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.